Hi, I'm Jenny Rustmeyer, and I took a left at the Valley.
I know we shouldn't have to scream that we're atheists. You know, we don't have non-astrologers and all that. But with religious people taking over the world, I mean, we can either speak up or be pushed into a corner.
I'm proud to be an atheist, a skeptic, a non-believer, an infidel, a heathen. I call it how I see it. I say it's ignorance and you just call it faith and unsubstantiated claims. That's something to be ashamed. I'm an atheist.
Coming at you from Louis XIV's Secret Armory, this is Left of the Valley. My name is Kevin, and Aramis had nothing on my sword skill. Joining me as usual is the all-for-one team who foiled Cardinal Richelieu's plan of domination. He taught Athos how to use his rapier on believers, Tyler.
I'm storming the Bastille as we speak, go away.
And he outfired Porthos with his own musket, Kevin.
Man, I just found out a way that you can make two parallel lines intersect and still be parallel.
Gentlemen, welcome back. Are you ready to skirmish French style or face the guillotine? That was a question for you guys.
Oh, what's that?
Oh, forget it. This is why I drink. And we got to welcome our old friend, Regina. Welcome back, dear.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege.
Well, you haven't been with us long enough to say that yet. We're going to have a great show today. Today we're going to be talking about depression with Jon McComb. We're going to have him coming on later on. But first, a little bit of chit-chat. Guys, did you hear that, according to Oxfam, apparently the top 8 billionaires are worth 50% of the world in money-wise. You know, they're worth the same as 50% of the world.
Yeah, I read that. Yeah, it's terrible. In Canada, it's 2 people
Yeah,
on
the top
same
2.
as the bottom 40%.
Actually, I've got 30%, but either way, it doesn't matter.
Potato.
Yeah, potato. I mean,
What do they pay for taxes?
I don't know. I don't
They
have the
have tax
information.
breaks is what they have.
That's right.
11% after all the tax.
Talk about inequality. You guys had a good week, I hope?
Yeah, except for the rich, man.
Except for the rich.
Well, this whole Trump thing, I was so excited for the election to be over, and it's just gotten so much
It just
worse.
keeps going, right? It just keeps going. Trump is now, it's official, and now it is the Trump era. Barack Obama is gone, and I don't know. Good luck to our American listeners, I guess. That's all I can say.
I'm so sorry, guys. Think Canada.
Yeah.
I have a little story to tell, though.
Okay, go for it.
So Lawrence Krauss posted a thing here the other day. I'm friends with him on Facebook, and he has a bunch of ridiculous friends. Anyways, he was just pointing out that the new White House website for Trump's thing, Mike Pence and his pictures and all that, it doesn't have anything mentioning the LGBT community anymore like it used to, and it doesn't mention anything about climate change like it used to. And if you look at the Snopes article, it says, it's a mixture of truth. And then it says, all those things are accessible on Obama's page. Okay, I don't see how that's a mixture of truth. All it's showing is that Donald Trump, created his own White House website and blah, blah. And obviously climate change and LGBT are not a top priority anymore. But the Snopes excuse was you can still find it on Obama's page. So what?
Yeah.
Every time you get a new president, they post their own, priorities. It doesn't matter if the previous president had climate change plans or anything. The new one comes in.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
it actually says on the website from Donald Trump that there's too many energy barriers for business. Like, that's the opposite of fighting climate change.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I was hoping he would have changed his mind, given that New York Times interview where he said, maybe there's a bit of a connection between humans. And I was hoping he would have changed his mind by now, given the fact that the scientific community around the world overwhelmingly supports anthropogenic climate change and that sort of thing. But he shouldn't be he's not a scientist. He's a moron on top of it, and he's not a scientist. Why not listen to the experts in the field?
He's like Biff from Back to the Future when he goes and becomes really powerful.
Hey, McFly!
I thought I told you never to come in here.
Make like a tree and get out of here. This is about as funny as a screen door on a battleship.
I was telling Kevin earlier that I'd done a call in to CKNW yesterday when they were asking about opinions re Trump, and I basically, and honestly and truly believe this, that it won't be nearly as good as his supporters think, maybe not nearly as bad as the rest of us think. So hopefully it's somewhere in between.
Yeah, I know he's moving very quickly right now, Donald Trump, on what he's trying to do.
My biggest concerns is the healthcare thing, because they've already got like 45,000 people that die every year simply because they don't have access to healthcare, and now it's going to be even worse. Obamacare was nowhere near as good as, socialized medicine in Canada, but still, all these people are going to go from, expensive healthcare to no health. His plan literally was open up a bank account, stick in some money, and save it up for your own stuff.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking, you go to an emergency room visit, you break your leg, you're talking $1,000, $2,000.
Break your leg, $1,000? It's $800 to get an IV drip. I mean,
yeah, plus a cast and plus so $2,000 because you break your leg. I mean,
easily, very easily.
You remember though that Trump's trying to get rid of something that's already in the process of being dismantled and replaced by the Patient Care Act, right? Which is still an Obama thing. So we'll see how that works out.
Yeah, some people like Bernie Sanders are trying very hard to make sure that the Republicans say, fine, if you want to eliminate Obamacare, sure, but replace it with something. Don't just leave the people hanging, and I think that's important. And I can't make a jab. I can't help but make a little jab at Hillary. Here's Bernie. Here's Bernie, right? He lost, and he's still fighting for the people. What happened to Hillary since she's lost? We haven't heard from her.
You suck.
No, where's she been?
Handshake, and she disappeared.
No, exactly, she just disappeared. It just shows who really cared about the people. Anyway, in my opinion. But speaking of Trump, a couple of shows ago, I was talking about. When Trump was getting nominated and elected and all that, I was talking about what really concerned me was Trump-style politics coming north of the 49th.
Kevin O'Leary?
That's right. And this week he announced that he is going to run for the leadership of the Conservative Party.
And try to abolish healthcare.
This guy's a douche. I'm sorry.
Did you see the Jeopardy thing I posted?
Yeah, I did see the Jeopardy thing.
Oh, man. They asked him about carbon dating, basically.
You couldn't say carbon-14.
He couldn't even say a number.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like,
they asked him a question about business, and he completely failed at it, too. I mean, don't get me wrong, Jeopardy's a hard game, and even myself, I can only answer, like, maybe 2 or 3 of those questions myself.
No,
but
Jeopardy's not hard, because they send you a packet to study before you go on the show.
Oh, okay.
So it kind of gives you a bit of an idea.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so... Well, no, I mean, it's just to give you... Everybody, it's not fixed, because everybody gets the equal packet, and they can kind of study what's going to happen on it, but...
What worries me here is Kevin O'Leary announced that he's going to run. Already people are saying, oh, that's such a good idea. Trudeau's horrible, and he's going to come in. And people are already throwing flowers. This is what worries me, because this guy is exactly like... I wouldn't say probably not as stupid as Donald Trump, but he's the same kind of guy who's going to use the same kind of tactics.
Yes.
And one of the things that I came across this past week is how he suggested... that the Senate seats, because there's been a big back and forth about the Senate.
Sell them all?
Sell the Senate seats. No! I mean, are you kidding me? Hold on, I've got a clip here. Let's listen into this.
We're protected. He cannot do that.
Oh, it'd be unconstitutional. But this is what the maybe next prime minister wants to do about this. Let's listen in.
Okay.
Talk about some things you and I have talked about. One, you said the solution to the Senate is not Senate reform, is to let people buy Senate seats. Anyone should be able to buy a Senate seat for $200,000. The taxpayer doesn't pay for it. Rich people, whoever they want, corporate sponsors. Do you really believe that's your Senate reform plan?
That's not exactly what I said. You still have to be accredited. But I would love the fact that if you're going to be a senator, you commit financially to it, because it's a role of honor. There's no question about it. It's an important institution within Canada. But I don't know why we can't have at least $100,000 or $200,000 a year committed to each senator. Instead of it being a cost center to Canada, why can't it be a profit center? It's an interesting idea. I'm happy to float it. I'm full of good ideas, Evan.
Well, you and I both know some of your candidates are saying you're full of something else, and that's why they say stop Kevin O'Leary. And on that very issue, they talk about campaign finance reform. Justin Trudeau's in a lot of hot water about campaign fundraising. You know it. But Kevin O'Leary, you've said you would get rid of campaign finance rules and let people contribute as much as possible. Do you still believe that?
I'm very frustrated. I don't know why I, as a successful entrepreneur, can't pay for my own campaign.
Well, for once, the rich white man is in control.
I don't understand that. That seems unfair. Why should I burden other people when I can afford to do the whole thing myself? I'm frustrated about it. I'm not happy with these rules. I just want transparency. If I told you I wanted to commit $2 million of my own dollars and told the government I was doing that and was totally transparent about it, what's wrong with that? I feel bad for all the candidates that have to run around and collect $1,500 at a time. I'm going to have to do the same thing, but I think it's unfair. Why not let me spend my own money? I don't see what's wrong with that as long as I'm transparent about it.
What if a company wants to donate $1 million to a campaign? Do you think that's okay?
As long as you're disclosing it. I'm not sure as a candidate you'd want one party or one company to give you that kind of money. It smacks, that you're going to have some commitment or an obligation. I wouldn't do that.
What to say about a clip like that? This is the guy that's talking about essentially, if you're rich, you can be a senator.
Mm-hmm, exactly, and he was saying things about honor. I don't think he really understands what honor is.
No,
if you can just buy your way into anything you do, that's not representative of the people at all.
No, and of course after that comes in was the kind of Trumpism he's already saying, I'm full of good ideas. Yeah. It's exactly what Trump would say.
Yeah,
it's exactly what Trump would say.
Little mini-me.
And then of course anybody can contribute, which is exactly the problem they have in the States with Citizens United. Anybody can contribute any amount of money, no problem.
No caps on it, right?
And I can't believe some Canadians are already falling for this guy. I mean, this is a douchebag of the biggest magnitude, and it worries me.
I would have thought that we were better educated than that, but apparently we aren't.
You guys know how Denmark does it?
How does Denmark do it?
No private funding whatsoever. It's all public.
Good.
Everybody gets the same kind of thing.
That way, it should be that way.
That way you don't have some oil company coming in saying, I'll pay for your campaign,
exactly.
but you got to kind of pay me
What
back.
do you think of mandatory voting?
I agree. I totally agree with that.
I totally agree.
What's the consequence if you don't?
Good question. Probably hanging public.
Maybe what we could do is give off a tax rebate if you do.
That would be
incentive.
better, yes.
Okay, but
carrot rather than the stick.
You can't.
Yeah.
The problem is
like
that I've known so many adults who don't understand the basic differences between the Liberals, the NDP, and the Conservative. I actually had a friend of mine who I've known for a long time. She was voting Conservative, thinking that she was voting for the NDP. So the only way, like the policy ideas, the only way that you could really do that is if you have a good political education class in high school so people know the differences.
I totally agree with that.
Because, I'm considered a liberal, but I would never vote for the Liberals. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Well,
you're entitled to your opinion.
Well, no, but I would vote for the Liberals. I'm further left than Tom Mulcair by far for the NDP.
I would vote for you, Tyler.
Everybody.
Vote for Tyler.
I'm more of like a Tommy Douglas kind of social democrat. You know what I mean? Like the Scandinavian system and that kind of thing. But
that wonderful, well, it wasn't a documentary, it was fictional, but it was on his life. I think it's called Prairie Giant. I wish they would show it.
It's not fictional.
Well,
but yeah, I've seen it. And
embellished, maybe?
It's to me should be shown in schools. I think starting around the age, or probably grade 5, and showing it every subsequent year.
It's pretty long, but it is good. Now, my grandfather was mayor of Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan back in those days, and he kind of worked with him and that sort of thing. So that kind of education regarding the NDP has been passed down to me. But they're doing the same thing that they did back then when we were trying to get health care here in Canada. They were saying, you're going to lose all your freedom, blah, blah. The doctors are going to be able to do this and do that, and there'll be video cameras in your, little doctor's room and that sort of thing. And it didn't work, but it does work in the States. They just scare the crap out of you into going along with their ideas.
Exactly. Well, moving on. Guys, did you know what? It's
Mail time.
Woo!
Mail? Hate mail?
We got some hate mail.
Is it from the same guy?
No, this is, we'll just name him Joe. Joe was, says...
Is that a pun based on Blue's Clues? Because I think the new guy's name was Joe, too.
Oh, I don't know.
Joe and Steve, send us hate mail.
Anyway, share us our hate mail.
Joe sends us an email that says, it's a good podcast, but he says, cut out the annoying movie clip inserts between dialogue. Amateur. Oh, my God.
That's true. I agree with him.
Houston, we have a problem.
I don't know what to say about that.
I like the sound effects as long as it's not the same sound effects.
Are we putting in too many sound effects? Is that what we're doing?
No. You should just put me in charge of it.
What happens if Joe represents the majority of what our listeners are thinking?
Well, how do we establish that?
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over. What the fuck are we gonna do now?
I don't know, man. Thank you, Joe, so much. We'll bear that into consideration.
That was it. That's the whole.
I thought it was going to be like venomous and stuff, but it
no,
wasn't.
it was just a simple short line. I mean, it's not really hate mail. It's
We're
just,
not allowed to give his real name and thank him because that is good feedback.
Well, he said Joe. He knows who he is. I don't want to put out his full name because I don't know.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
I've been telling Kevin for a long time to use new sound effects, so thanks, Joe. Holy shit balls. Sorry, that was the best one. That's the David Fitzgerald episode. That was great.
Okay, well, Nancy's not here, but we do have a pre-recorded version of This Day in History. Let's go to that right now.
Let's go. This Day in History, which, as we know by now, is a roundup of those events and individuals that altered and illuminated the days between January the 16th and the 22nd. And starting with the 16th, it's Martin Luther King Day. Again, I know it seems
happens
like
every year.
I know, and you know, it's I think it's really wonderful that day falls every 4 years. MLK Day falls with the inauguration, and you can't help but take the history of what MLK accomplished and where we are now to contrast the two.
Exactly.
And this year it's very dramatic. Very dramatic.
Interesting indeed.
Yeah, exactly. January the 18th is Revolution Day in Tunisia. And in 1773, on that day, Captain James Cook became the first one to cross the Antarctic Circle. And in 1929, Edwin Hubble communicated the now classic paper that first showed the universe was expanding and later provide observational evidence for the Big Bang Theory. So, and happy birthday to Michelle Obama, by the way, on the 18th as well. I hope she does well. What a
I liked her. I really liked her as a first lady. I
yeah.
thought she was like just a black Jackie O even.
Fabulous. The way she related to every age.
She was just cool.
Yeah, she's a cool lady. Good luck, Michelle.
Oh, yeah.
Also, the 18th was a relatively quiet day in history, other than Michelle, if you want to overlook Dr. William Price trying to cremate his infant son, Jesus Christ Price. Oh, man, what a story this is. Dr. William Price was born in Wales in 1800 and studied to become a doctor. He was a vegetarian nudist who believed in free love and herbal remedies, just like all the other doctors we know, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, this isn't a character you'd instantly associate with 19th century Wales, but Dr. William Price was one of the most colorful and intriguing individuals of his age. He became renowned for his unconventional manner, refusing to treat patients who smoked because he despised the habit, and he also had his patients pay him when they were well instead of when they became sick. There are several cultures, that promote that kind of payment to doctors.
If you go to England, you actually get a bonus.
Yeah, exactly.
Patients get better.
Yeah, so Price proclaimed himself to be an art druid and wore a scarlet waistcoat, green trousers, and a fox fur hat while carrying out his druid ceremonies. I don't know whether he dressed that way as a doctor or not.
Yeah, but purple heart, yellow moon, and green clovers.
Yeah, almost. He was also prone to going for long walks in the nude, which behavior earned him a reputation for eccentricity, to say the least. He was a character. So unlike doctors of his age, Price was an advocate of herbal remedies and dispensed his own potions to the sick under his care. And that earned him, as if he didn't have enough to earn him a reputation. Hard to believe he had a reputation as a quack rather than a genuine medical practitioner. But it seems certain that he viewed the work of his contemporaries in much the same way, denouncing their traditional methods of medicine. He opposed practices such as vivisection and vaccination. So anyway, in accordance with his unconventional views, getting down to why we're talking about him, other than the fact that he seemed to be kind of a nut bar, Price despised laws and its administrators and was an avid Tsarist. He played a part in the planning of the Tsarist Rising in Newport in 1839 by organizing a supply of arms. Although he didn't participate in the Rising itself, he escaped to Paris in its aftermath. So many years later, while in his 80s, He met and fell in love with a young woman many decades his junior named Gwenlillian Llewellyn. She was his housekeeper, and together they had 3 children, one of whom was christened Jesus Christ Price.
Jeez,
yeah.
No pressure there.
Oh, no. And he did it, which was apparently designed to enrage the local churchgoers, as he was an ardent opponent of Orthodox religion. So Jesus died in infancy. Now we're getting down to it after we painted this picture. He died in infancy, and his father chose to cremate his son's body, an act for which Price is probably best remembered. On January 18th, 1884, he burned the child's body in front of onlookers on a hillside near his home, which I'm sure,
like an
to
ancient
the
Viking ritual.
Yeah, to the consternation of all of his neighbors.
Yeah.
But he believed that cremation was in accordance with ancient Celtic practices. So he was prosecuted for the act in the winter in Cardiff, where he lived, but the jury surprisingly found him not guilty. And the judgment established the precedent for the legality of cremation in Britain, and Price was hailed by its promoters, though his motivation was his Druid belief and not because he was on any kind of an activist role, to be able to promote cremation, as a practice that would be traditional. So he died on the 23rd of January in 1893 in comparative poverty, and he left detailed instructions for his body to be cremated in a cast iron sheeting. Interesting person, in history. Yeah, but that's why we took the time, because if it wasn't for him, we probably wouldn't have an early pathway to cremation, which is well accepted at this point. In 1905, let's celebrate the beginning of something a better topic here in history, something that's so iconically Canadian and so common that we don't even think about it at all. And it is, ta-da, the day that Canada Dry Ginger Ale was patented by John J. McLaughlin in 1905. And by the way, a bit of trivia, the original label had a beaver sitting atop the map of Canada.
Of course.
And also, happy birthday to Marc Messier.
Oh.
January 20th was Inauguration Day in the States, and the birthday of the only real Tarzan, Johnny Weissmuller, whose victory cry of the bull ape lives on in ringtones. So congratulations to the United States for having another inauguration, and for Johnny Weissmuller, who, maybe it would be lovely to have a drop, of his.
We'll add a drop.
We'll add a drop. And that, dear listeners, brings to a close another passing parade of interesting, mundane, unusual, and occasionally bizarre events and people that make up this day in history.
Thank you very much, Nancy, as usual. Now, before we get to Jon McComb, let's do another brilliant moment brought to you by religion. Now, I got a good story for you guys this week. There was a guy that was driving through Amarillo, Texas, when he saw this disturbing billboard saying, "Vaccines can cause autism." And the subtitle says, "Choose intelligent design." The signs, or at least 2 of them, have been up for over a month, and a lot of local residents are pretty much infuriated. There's a guy at the bottom that says www.drfit.com. It really concerned me when I saw it, because it was like people are going to see this and believe it without doing their own research and doing their own investigating, without talking to their own doctors, said Tassie Haley. It just made me upset seeing it. The sponsor of the sign, which is Robbie Mitchell, MD, or Dr. Fit, claims there is evidence showing a link between vaccines and autism, and that what he is putting on the sign is nothing new. He said he just wants parents to be informed.
I have a daughter who's autistic, and I know that is complete BS.
How many vaccines did you cause your daughter's autism?
Well, how dare I gave her extra ones, just to make sure that she got it.
I'll give you the link between vaccines and autism. Is that at the age that you typically get the vaccines and the age that autism shows up. That's kind of
they're correlated because like you typically vaccinate kids around 4, and people typically start exhibiting signs of autism around 4. So people are looking. That was why the guy did the initial study, which he like completely like fabricated the results.
I forget the name of that guy with
Andrew Wakefield.
Yeah,
Andrew
it was like
Wakefield.
he studied like 12 cases. I mean,
and he admitted to fraud.
He admitted to it. His whole paper was pulled from like scientific literature. Period.
They're still pushing that. I can't believe this, but it just shows. It's the snowball effect, right? It's been over for how long?
There's going to be a news story here that says billboards promoting pseudoscience causes me to vandalize them. It's ridiculous. Like, this is just making people dumber.
Somebody had vandalized one that said "God listens." That's what the sign said, and they put underneath in big red letters, Slayer. God listens to Slayer.
It reminds me of that time when I used to have a full-size van. And of course, it gets dirty here during the winter, especially, you get all this dust on it. And on the back, as I park at the rec center, I wrote with my finger on the back of my van, "Jesus is coming, look busy." So I went to the gym at the rec center at the time. By the time I came out, all the back of my van had been wiped clean.
Well, I should give you guys a bit of an update on that Logical Fallacies Illustrated Book of Bad Arguments that I kind of want to push. So I talked to my daughter's school, and I didn't realize this because I'm from Saskatchewan, right? So I lost the birth lottery. Her school only goes from kindergarten to grade 6, so I'm thinking that's a little young, but I did call the school and was asking about curriculum and the PTA kind of thing, and I was talking to the secretary who sounded to be about 50, and I said, I'm just wondering if you guys talk to any of your students about logical fallacies, and she says, logical fallacies, what's that?
I don't know, grade 1 to 6,
I wanted to stick my head through a wall. I was like, are you serious? You've never heard of a logical fallacy? So
grade 1 to 6 isn't too young. I mean, you can indoctrinate them with some other things. So why not logic?
I do teach my oldest daughter. I said, a lot of people are like, I don't know how the pyramids were built. Therefore, aliens. I don't know what that thing is in the sky.
Are you saying that they didn't?
Well,
what?
Arguments from ignorance, that sort of thing. But I think that's the key to this whole thing. It explains all the conspiracy theories, all of the quantum woo, all of the science woo, God, all of the stuff really comes down to being based on logical fallacies. So I'm hoping
that and aliens.
Well, that too, but
I'm still a while back on the conversation because I'm not going to try to make the link between vaccinations and autism. But racking my brain to remember the name of the author, in which I can't right now. But the book Unbroken Brain I would recommend. In that it talks about addictions, and apparently.
Why are you looking at me when you say broken brain?
Unbroken brain. Unbroken brain.
Unbroken brain.
And it's interesting because it's written by a woman who's a journalist and who had been addicted to heroin, cocaine, and a few other things, and it's an incredibly interesting book. And she writes that apparently people that deal with autism are more likely, or they'll lean towards addictions, which I'd never seen anywhere else.
So you're saying you're advocating cocaine and heroin?
I'm advocating reading that book.
It's actually the same with
Regina,
schizophrenia.
not necessarily those. Let's do that again.
Yeah, schizophrenia is the same sort of way. Like schizophrenics actually self-medicate by smoking and doing like cocaine.
Interesting. That could easily be the connection.
ADD is another stimulant.
I actually posted a link the other day that kind of offended people, and it's kind of linked to today's show.
It wouldn't be you if you didn't.
I know, right?
No doubt. Once a week at least.
It was it was from Cracked. You know that website, right?
Yeah, I saw that one.
Anyways, it was like brain disorders that used to be beneficial, and if you really think about it, I mean, our society today is completely different than it was, pre-Neolithic revolution, agricultural revolution, that kind of thing. Imagine a caveman with autism, or ADHD.
He would have been super genius and come up with really great inventions if he had low spectrum.
And the other one is OCD. You're just obsessed with stockpiling food.
My club's just not right.
Well, and that's the ADHD thing, is we keep giving kids Ritalin instead of keeping them busy. If you had a caveman who had ADHD, he would be jumping from one thing to another thing to another thing.
Problem is that they never stop being busy. They will go until their body literally.
Yeah. But he would be a very helpful person in the caveman society. You don't just have one person.
Don't worry, Gronk's got it. He's going to be up all night.
Caveman with OCD. Did I leave the fire on? Did I leave the fire on?
Well, or even cleanliness, right? Like people.
I don't think that mattered in a cave.
My daughter is almost 3, and she definitely shows signs of OCD. She cannot be messy. She has to be super clean. She can't have garbage anywhere. She just freaks out about it. But if you think about, bacteria and survival and that kind of thing, the caveman who went out, took a shit and got it on his hand and didn't really care, he got sick and died and killed some of the people. But
he got immunity. Like eventually, natural selection would make sure that he was immune to that certain whatever.
Is this what this show is derailing into? We're talking about poop and caveman here?
I guess so. Yeah.
Anyway, we're gonna take a break now, and we'll be right back with Jon McComb from CKNW. Stay with us.
Poop and caveman.
Oh, jeez. Interested in a particular topic? You ever wonder where we find all this information?
The Common Sense Canadian is a forum for critical discussion of the key issues shaping our world today: water, energy, food security, and how we manage our resources to the public benefit while preserving our environment. So go to commonsensecanadian.ca. It's uncommonly sensible.
Do you know where Saskatchewan is? Probably not. It's in Canada. If you do, you might know a city named Regina. In Regina, there's a studio. And in that studio, there are, at least once a month, a bunch of skeptical atheist geeks and goofballs who get together to do a podcast. We are the Brainstorm Crew, and we're trying to help spread a bit of reason and critical thinking while still having fun. Never taking things too seriously, but still not accepting everything we're told. We go through different topics, exploring them in depth, and often disagreeing. We try to stick to provable facts, and we never trust a myth. That's why we say we're woo-free since 2013. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, or Spreaker under Brainstorm, or check out our website, brainstormblog.net. I can't promise you'll always agree with us, but I can promise you'll have fun listening to us.
Hi, I'm the Supreme Irreverend Dr. Randy Tyson from the Legion of Reason Diversion. Join me and my co-hosts, Christine Shelska, Twyla, and Nate Phelps, as we explore issues at the intersection of atheism, humanism, and skepticism. Topics range from alternative medicine to the interference of religion in public policy. We often have special guests to help us understand the topic du jour. Previous guests include biologist Jerry Coyne, ex-Muslim author Ali Rizvi, philosopher Peter Boghossian, and the late physicist Victor Stanger. You can watch us on the Legion of Reason YouTube channel or subscribe to the audio version through your favorite podcatchers such as iTunes or Stitcher. And don't forget to like the Legion of Reason Facebook page.
All my friends are heathens, take it slow. Wait for them to ask you who you know. Please don't make any sudden moves. You don't know the half of the abuse. All my friends are heathens, take it slow. Wait for them to ask you who you know.
Our next guest is a veteran broadcaster at CKNW 980, the Giant in Vancouver. He won the Governor General's Caring Canadian Award for his efforts to fight mental illness stigma. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jon McComb. Jon, how are you today?
And now your volume has gone away. Oh, I can hear you now.
Okay, good.
Can you hear me now? Great.
Verizon Wireless.
How are you, Jon?
Hi, guys. Really a pleasure to be with you. Thanks for inviting me onto your show. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your time. This is awesome.
You're welcome.
Jon, a lot of our listeners are international, and a lot of our listeners are from the U.S. and other parts of the country. You're here on the West Coast. They might not necessarily know who Jon McComb is. Would you be so kind to give us the Jon McComb story?
Well, strangely enough, I host a radio show called The Jon McComb Show on CKNW Radio in Vancouver. It's a news and talk station. And I host the morning show, and I've been doing that for the last 2.5 years or so. I've been in the radio business all my life, 46 years, and I've been at CKNW now for the last 34 years. So, yeah, it was the only thing I wanted to do when I was a kid, and thankfully it all worked out because not having any other marketable skills, it's paid the rent and put food on the table. So,
good stuff. Good stuff. You have been a big fighter to fight the stigma against mental illness, and to the point that, like we said earlier, we actually got the Governor General's Caring Canadian Award, and you were quite honest saying that you yourself suffered from depression. Would you care to elaborate on that?
Well, yeah, the mental health piece is something that's, looking back, has probably been with me all of my life as a little kid, suffering from anxiety. And that, as I grew older, kind of turned into depression. And I think some of it has to do with genetics. People further up the line of my family who have suffered from mental health problems. My dad suffered PTSD quite badly after the Second World War. So there was, I think, kind of a predilection for it in the family. And yeah, it took me a long time to kind of get my head around the fact that I did have a mental illness. And part of that was because I was ashamed. I had, my own self-imposed stigma around admitting that I had a mental illness. So it took me a long time, to get finally get some help and get some proper treatment. In fact, it took an episode about 12, 13 years ago where I just kind of hit the wall and crashed, and my doctor said I had burnout, and I took 7 months off from work because I simply wasn't able to work anymore. I couldn't, I was having panic attacks on the air, which I don't recommend. I was having, I was down all the time to the point where I couldn't really function properly. So it actually took that for me to, get my act together and get healthy again. So, and through all of that, I came to understand why people, self-stigmatize, because even today, it's not something that a lot of people will talk about. If you have a heart attack, it's one thing. If you have, trouble with your stomach or liver disease, nobody's really ashamed to talk about it. But when it comes to mental health, over the years, that self-stigma and that shame are two very, very big obstacles for people to try to get over. So that's why I started talking about it on the radio, and one of my listeners nominated me for the Governor General's Award, and it was great. It was fantastic.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to put in a few facts here about depression, because I think depression is very misunderstood. 20% of all Canadians will experience a mental illness in their lifetime. 8% will experience major depression. 1% of them will experience schizophrenia, and 5% will experience a lot of anxiety. 49% of sufferers never get checked, never get diagnosed. It has cost $7.9 billion to the healthcare system, and this is in 1998. There's an additional $6.3 billion spent on mental health services and time off work. 3% of all hospital admissions are mental health related, and 10 to 20% of youth are affected, and that 10 to 20%, 5% of them are male, 12% of them are female. John, I think a lot of people, when they think of depression, it seems like a bit like, I call it a ghost term, because it's vague. I mean, people can have some up and down, some days where they don't feel, they feel a bit apathetic or something like that. Sure. But how do you know if you're actually suffering from depression?
Well, what an incredibly stupid question.
Well, for me, there was this underlying problem with anxiety. So let me start there. The anxiety, it's hard to explain. It's like you're on guard all the time. Like you're never really comfortable. You're never really sort of comfortable in your own skin. So you're always kind of waiting for that other shoe to drop, that something catastrophic is going to happen, it never does, but you have that anticipation, and that's what a lot of anxiety was. And in growing up in my family, I call it capital D dysfunctional, because my dad suffered from PTSD after the Second World War, so he self-medicated with alcohol, became an alcoholic. My mother was a nurse. She had, I think she had the same thing that I have, but in those days they didn't recognize it as that. So she got into problems with prescription drugs, and it was one horror show and horror story after another. Until when I was 17, I came home one night and found my mother dead on the living room floor.
Oh,
and that kind of that was the beginning of adulthood for me. So all I wanted to do was we were living in Tucson, Arizona at the time where I grew up, and all I wanted to do was just get the hell out and get on with my life. So instead of dealing with or trying to sort out any of these emotions or issues, I just stuffed them and said, hell with it, I'm going to go get on with my radio career. And that turned out to be a mistake, because it took me, up into my 40s to really come to terms with the problems I was having. So, yeah, all of that to say that the stigma thing has been really big for me, and it's one of the reasons I've used my radio show to try to tell other people, or to let other people know that, it's not just them who are suffering.
Excellent, yeah. There was such a stigma for a long time. I mean, we're working on it now, but everyone saw the body as ending right at the neck, and then the head was a totally different thing, but it's all one big, giant unit.
There's also the idea that, what is normal as far as the mental state is concerned. I don't think we've ever actually defined what's that. So it's hard to say when a person is quote-unquote normal.
Yeah.
And for the record, John, I will tell you that you don't need to feel bad about it. Nobody wants to stay in Tucson.
Well, I'm pretty guilty for it myself. Years ago, before I understood the stuff, I would say, it's kind of a first world problem. If you don't have a reason to be sad, and you're still sad, then shut up and stop whining.
Yeah, we hear that a lot. Right?
Now I understand that that's just not how it works. Like John said, there is indeed a genetic component. I can show you the Stanford studies, but it's basically like there's an environmental factor too, but the genetics is kind of like the bullet in the gun. Mm-hmm. And then the environmental factor is kind of pulling the trigger.
Okay.
Yeah. It helps to think of it like diabetes, right?
So, and another interesting thing about what John said regarding his dad getting, PTSD and from World War II, was that before you were born or conceived, or?
Yeah, he was. He had a fair amount of trauma in his life growing up. His dad was. He saw his dad killed in a car accident when he was 12 years old, and so he had that, on his shoulders. And then he enlisted in the Marine Corps when he was 17. He lied about his age and got into the Marine Corps. And they ended up shipping him off to the South Pacific, to the Solomon Islands, which was some of the grisliest and most horrible fighting that took place in the South Pacific.
Absolutely.
And he saw a lot of his buddies were shot up and killed and stuff. And that experience, finally he was wounded, so they shipped him back to the San Diego Naval Hospital, where he met my mother. And he never processed any of that anger or fear or all of the stuff that goes along with it. He did the same thing I did and just stuffed it.
That's what real men do, right?
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, all those guys came back as heroes, right? They'd won the war, and everybody was celebrating. But there was about 20% of them who came back really fucked up, and he was one of them. So it took me a long time to kind of sort out, because I had a lot of anger toward him, and a lot of resentment, and it took me a while to kind of figure out what his deal was, and then it all kind of started to make sense to me that he was just passing on down the line the crap that he had inherited and had to deal with as well. So yeah, it's interesting how it does run in families, and that's just another component of it, I think.
Are you familiar with epigenetics at all?
I've heard the phrase, but I don't know what it is.
Well, I'll give you an example.
Tyler, put your microphone in front of you. I can barely hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, much better.
Okay, so there's this interesting study where they took father rats and had them, smell this scent. It was like almonds or nuts, or it doesn't matter. Anyways, so they would have them smell it, and then they would electrocute them every time they smelled it. So it got to the point where they would smell this scent, and they would be absolutely terrified of being electrocuted.
Conditioned response.
So then they waited, and then they had these male rats father children, and this was all double blind, that sort of thing. And then they had the babies of those fathers were exposed to the scent, and they were absolutely terrified of the scent, even though they hadn't been conceived by that point. So it kind of makes me think of what you said, about your dad is there's similar experiments, with the Dutch famine and all these different things. But it's kind of like your environment tells your dad, this is some stressful ass shit, build up some defense to it. But then you inherited it, but you didn't go to World War II, obviously. Yeah. So, but you've still got kind of the brain structure, the anxiety, the depression, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's passed down genetically, for sure.
Hold on. You guys are not suggesting we electrocute Jon McComb, are you?
Well, I was thinking about it.
I'm thinking you can inherit fears. They've noticed the same thing with the Jewish Holocaust survivors and their grandchildren. They tend to have some mental issues with PTSD and stuff.
Phobias with animals like spiders and snakes is very common because it's genetically passed down.
Yeah, so I think there is actually a benefit to depression, so I'm hoping this doesn't really offend a whole bunch of people because I understand people aren't a big fan of evolutionary psychology, but there is a lot of evidence to it. They've actually done problem-solving studies on people with depression and people without depression. And the people with depression tend to be a lot more analytical, and they can kind of disassociate or detach from their emotions in order to focus on the problem. So you got to think about cavemen 20,000 years ago, one that has depression. I mean, it's going to be a bit of a signal to the tribe of 50 people that their role in society is not working out for them, and they're able to focus on their problems. So I really do think there is an advantageous, benefit to depression, but living in the 21st century, not so beneficial.
No, exactly.
But is introspection necessarily a product of depression?
No, John, on your efforts on finding the stigma and all that, we're seeing today a lot of people, they're recognizing PTSD. And like you said, PTSD wasn't recognized back then, so it is sort of recognized now. Do you think we're moving the same way with depression? We're kind of, for lack of a better term, evolving in our understanding of the mental illness.
Well, yeah, I do. Although I don't think, in a lot of ways, that society generally is really still has a handle on it or understands what it is, because it is very difficult to explain to people, like, well, why do you always feel bad? What do you mean you feel bad? What does that look like? And in my case, a lot of times it manifests as anger. I had this low level annoyance all the time. So I'd snap at my kids, I'd snap at my wife, I'd drag myself off to work, that kind of thing,
John, isn't that exactly
after a while you lose the ability to understand what happiness is, because you're so far down in that trench all the time that becomes your way of life.
Isn't that exactly the case, though, that each individual experiences depression in an entirely different way? A broken leg is similar to another broken leg, but I don't think people experiencing depression share it, and sometimes don't even know that they're experiencing it themselves.
Mm-hmm, exactly. It's a good point.
Yeah, I think that's true. It often is very individual, and it depends on the experiences. I mentioned the environmental part. It depends on the experiences of the individual as well. In my case, it was pretty crazy from the get-go, and so that was sort of the normal to me. And so feeling anxious and feeling like the other shoe was going to drop became my normal way of being in the world. And it, as I say, it took me a few years into adulthood to finally sort out that, whoa, wait a minute, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. This isn't the way life is, is meant to be.
May I ask how young it was when you first experienced the anxiety?
Yeah, you'd mentioned it was when you were a kid, right?
When I was a very little kid, from the time I was, 4, 5, 6 years old. My brother has always said I've always been a little spooky. So,
and that would be a survival benefit as well. Now, one thing that most people aren't aware of is that they've basically concluded that we keep throwing antidepressants at people, and more than 90% of the time, antidepressants don't do shit. Yeah. And you actually have to do
Is that a technical term?
You actually have to do a genetic test in order to basically pick your antidepressant that'll actually work with you. Otherwise, it's like just giving out candy.
They know a lot more about the pharmacology and everything nowadays than they did, like, say, 10 years ago. But
no, but you can totally see John's example. For example, he started this suffering from this as a kid, and if you're a young kid that's feeling down or not very happy, what do you tell that kid? You kind of dismiss it. Right, you dismiss it offhand. Oh, here's a new toy. You'll be happy with this or whatever, right?
Well, what are you supposed to do as a society? I mean, you're supposed to actually change the roles, because obviously, if you're depressed, then your role isn't working. But we don't care. I mean, you don't like your job. You don't like where you live. Suck it up.
Yeah, that's right. That's what we always say. Yeah.
So that's not
and it's true. And people go from job to job, and they go from relationship to relationship, and they go from town to town, or whatever it happens to be. Without any insight into why this is happening, they all they know is that they need to go and do or be somewhere else, and I think that's part of the driver too, is that people just don't have any real insight, into why they're leading their life the way they are, and again, the same thing with me. It took me a long time to go, oh, wait a minute, and I tried everything and spent thousands of dollars, literally, trying to deal with. It almost became a hobby, trying to deal with my shtick, my inner demons. And I went to therapy, and I took mega vitamins, and I had sat with my inner child, and I had my chakras aligned, and
what worked then?
Every wacky thing on the planet to try to deal with this myself, and I spent just a ton of money just bouncing from one thing to the next and reading the next book and the next self-help thing, and finally, as I say, I crashed and gave up. Basically, I said, okay, I can't handle this, so let's see what else there is. So,
did something help though? Ever?
Oh yeah, going to a doctor and taking the medication. Now, there's a certain, the way we look at it now, I think, is, as you say, is far different than it was 10 or 15 years ago, because they're finding out that antidepressants aren't the solution. They worked for me, and I still take them in the morning. Although as I've grown older, I'm starting to think that I need them less, and have and sort of giving serious thought to starting to come off them, and seeing where things are at, because it does become a habit, and I felt so bad for so long that when I finally started feeling pretty good, I didn't want to screw around with it. I thought,
make sure that
the baseline's good. Let's just leave it. Let's
it's
not
working,
mess with it.
so you go
don't do it
off
without
the-
doctor's supervision. Okay.
Do you
Well,
do you exercise at all?
I just came off some stuff cold turkey about 2 weeks ago without telling my doctor, so I'm a bit of a risk taker.
Do you exercise at all, John?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
I go to the gym. I work with a trainer a couple of days a week.
Are you kidding? That's part of one of his segments on his show. He's
for
talking
you.
about
Yeah.
fitness, and it's always a blast.
I don't have a lot of time to listen to stuff, but I've been in the same situation now. I went blind when I was 13 years old for playing with the homemade explosives, and I kind of blew myself up and lost my left. And I went blind in the other eye, and I kept going through, all these different problems and stuff, and they just kept trying to give me medication. They never actually tried to help me stay busy, and I think that's one of the main things that people need is they need to have a purpose and be busy, whether it be ADHD or autism or OCD or depression or that sort of thing. And I'm dealing with it now because I'm not working, and that's very, very, very depressing. So, I'm on disability, and they just give me my check every month and tell me to go away. And I say, you know what? Give me a job. I'll work for free. I'd be more than happy to just work just to stay busy. It would benefit me. And there's nothing out there for that. They just kind of give you the money and tell you to go away.
Yeah, it's funny because for me the salvation was the radio business, because again, having had that drive since I was a little kid, because I mean realistically when you look at how a lot of people end up, I should have been addicted, I should have been in jail, I should have been at any number of outcomes. But I think because I had this bug about radio, that was the one thing that I focused on from being just a teenage, 12, 13-year-old kid. That's where I put a lot of my time and energy in focusing on that. And
well, yeah, that's your social contribution, like the caveman who goes and gets the wood. You know what I mean? If he's depressed and not liking that, they try to find him a new job. So they found depression to be common around the world, even in third world countries where people basically live like cavemen. So the fact that there is a genetic component, there is a survival benefit to it, really shows that we need to actually do something environmentally. I mean, if we need to point people in the right direction, like I said, I tell the government, give me a job. I'd like to earn my disability check. And they just tell me to go away. Any
of our listeners got a job with Tyler, he'll take it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
John,
especially in the radio.
That upsets the paradigm, right? Because if you get a job and you are paid for it, then, they'll kick you off your disability. I mean, they don't see the need for people to have something, to work at or to.
They discourage you. They actually discourage you. They punish you for working. Actually, I'm only allowed to make $1,000 a month on top of my disability. So
I think the medical, we are moving towards finally accepting that and acknowledging it. But it's been a long haul.
Yeah. John, when you look at the future and all your efforts, and you have your thumb on the pulse of a lot of what's going on in the area, are you optimistic?
Yeah, I am. It's one of the things I did when I started talking about my situation on the air is I got involved pretty heavily in fundraising, and I worked on a couple of projects. One of them was the one at Vancouver General Hospital that they should be finishing up soon. It'll be a brand new 100-bed mental health unit, and I've done some other fundraising things as well. And there's more of an understanding, because mental illness has always been the ugly sister of medicine, right? It was never really funded properly, and because of the stigma thing, I think it was kind of given short shrift. But now, because of the outcry, because so many people are affected by it, they are starting to build purpose-built mental health facilities, and so. It's been slow, but I think it is improving slowly.
It's interesting. They're actually pulling funding from some of the long-term care facilities for people who can't take care of themselves in the public.
Yeah.
And moving places like Mountain View out in Yarrow, for example.
Oh,
they're shutting it down.
Yeah, that was bad.
Yeah.
Any final question for John before we let him go?
I'm very interested in the current homeless situation, and I've looked at the stats for chronic homelessness. I'm not talking about people who don't have a place to live for a month. The people under the bridge and stuff. It tends to really be half addiction, half mental health, whether it be schizophrenia or this or that. And they're not helping these people. They're just kind of leaving them. So if you were Prime Minister of Canada and you could, create some policies to help with this kind of thing, what would you do?
Good question.
Jon McComb for Prime Minister.
I decline respectfully. I think there's a problem with, we have the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, right? So the authorities can't essentially force you to do anything. But when they emptied out places like Riverview, and when they said we're going to set up, community health care centers, and then they didn't, what they did was dumped a lot of people out on the street who simply were not capable of taking care of themselves. They just were not capable of staying on the medication or staying on the therapy or doing the, going to the gym and getting exercise, doing the things that you're supposed to do to try to stay healthy. And so those people got left by the wayside, and they ended up sleeping under bridges, and a lot of them ended up with addiction problems. I was on the downtown east side not too many weeks ago, just talking to people about the fentanyl crisis, and how did you end up here? And a lot of them just mental health problems, schizophrenia, depression, didn't know what to do, ended up down there and self-medicated with whatever was on the street. And so now the stigma thing is being addicted. Well, if people would sort of step back a second and put the judgment and the morality and all the bullshit aside and say, okay, how do people end up down here? Then I think we could probably save a hell of a lot of money and a hell of a lot of lives by properly getting people the treatment they need. And if they can't look after themselves, finding a way to put them in a place where they're safe and where they're healthy, can get healthy and go from there. So
and educating the public, right? The public needs to know too.
Well, and you might be interested to know that it's actually 3 times cheaper to just take those homeless people and give them a home as opposed to leaving them on the streets, because they cost health care and crime and this and that kind of thing. So
I agree with Tyler there, because we have a very compassionate chief of police out here. At one presentation that he gave to our counselors, he said that people are not homeless because they're addicts, but they're addicts because they're homeless. And I thought that was very interesting.
In most cases, I'd say.
They need a purpose, right? I mean, finding your next heroin fix is a purpose. It keeps you busy, right?
Yeah.
It's just not contributing to society. So I have some stuff that I'd like to forward on to you in case you're interested. There's actually a book called The Survival of Sadness, which I found very, very interesting.
All right.
John, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate everything, your generosity with your time with us. If people want to find out more about your efforts and what you're doing to combat the stigmas of mental illness, where can they reach you?
They can get a hold of me through the radio station's website, which is CKNW.com, and there is a link there to get in touch with me via email.
Perfect. And John, before I let you go, can I get you to do one little thing for us?
Sure.
Can you say, hi, I'm Jon McComb of the Jon McComb Show, and I took a left at the Valley.
Hi, I'm Jon McComb from the Jon McComb Show, and I took a left at the Valley.
And that was Jon McComb of CKNW. Great guy, great show. I highly recommend you listen to the show every morning on the Giant 980 AM. Time for my rant. Well, there you have it, guys. We tackle a ghost of a problem within our society. Depression is an elusive illness which adds to the burden of being kind of taboo. As an atheist, I couldn't help but make some parallels with what many atheists and non-believers go through on a regular basis. Being a freethinker in this day and age is still regarded as either selfish, mentally unstable, and even dangerous, where many of us remain closeted because of the taboo of not bowing the knee to some Bronze Age fiction. When you live in a world where it seems the overwhelming population thinks there's something wrong with you, it can be easy to retreat in comfortable cocoon, pass over the extended hand of others, and fall into the pit of nihilism or other morose philosophy because you don't see eye to eye with theists. It's your fault, don't you know? Snap out of it and join us in God's love. You see the parallel yet? But shows like this one and many others should have made something abundantly clear by now. You're not alone, and you're not crazy. On the contrary, you see the world for what it really is. You see a species still in its infancy clinging on to the comfortable blankie called God. You see a species scared and afraid to face an indifferent universe and wishing for parental protection. And when you have the gall to say so, you are shamed and pressured into conforming. As a social species, that pressure is difficult to face, and thus you start questioning if there's something wrong with you. Trust me, there isn't. Quite the contrary. You have stepped out of the infancy of our species and asserted some independence. Atheists are like that kid that starts questioning Santa, while his or her brother and sister affirm the magical elf is quite real. They'll even go to the length of mocking that kid and pressure him or her back into the loving arms of jolly Saint Nick. Don't fall into the trap. Don't step backwards because it's comfortable and familiar. Step out into the light, and although it can be scary, you'll find the others just like you. The ones that don't believe in flying reindeers, Jewish carpenters walking on water, or desert raiders splitting the moon. Life begins outside your comfort zone, and outside the sea of ignorance that is religion. You're not crazy, you're the sane one. And that takes us to the end of our show. I want to thank Jon McComb, as well as my co-hosts Tyler, Kevin, and our guest Regina for having another great show once again. Thank you so much for joining us today on the show. You can give us a 5-star review if you really appreciate what we're doing here, and it would really help, especially on iTunes. You can follow us at the Blog Talk Radio, Spreaker, SoundCloud, YouTube. You can send us a message on leftatthevalley.com, or follow us at leftatthevalley.com. You can send us a message on Twitter or on Facebook. Twitter handle is at LATV Podcast. Coming up next week, we will have the velvety voice of legendary atheist Seth Andrews in his show. That should be great. So also down the road, we'll be talking to Michael Smith of Poorly Summarized Podcast, which is a really nice little podcast. I highly recommend it. It's really fun. And also in the month of March, we'll be talking to Cara Santa Maria. We got some great things coming down for you guys for the next couple of months. Make sure to join us. You can send us a message at leftatvalley@outlook.com. Guys, thank you so much. Until next time.
Genocide and pain caused by your cold. There must be something missing in your brain. I'm proud to be an atheist, a skeptic, a non-believer, an infidel, a heathen. I call it how I see it. I say it's ignorance and you just call it faith and unsubstantiated claims. That's something to be ashamed. I'm an atheist. I'm an atheist. I'm an atheist. It amazes me how perfectly intelligent people can reach the conclusion that all non-believers are evil. What a fucked up statement. Do you realize what you're saying? But according to your book, this is how your God made me. Skeptical of anything that contradicts history, denies evolution, hates science, promotes mystery. I'd rather seek the truth than to bask in my own ignorance. Rather be alone than surrounded by damn idiots. As long as there's a breath in my body, you can bet your last dollar I'll be working hard fighting this problem. Religion is a disease, it comes from culture, only true on a regional scale. Science is universal. Were you to say that Horus isn't real, but Jesus is, or Zeus, Thor, Mithra, Vishnu, you don't believe in them? I think the reason is apparent. You do what you're told and believe in the God assigned by your parents. I'm proud to be an atheist, a skeptic, a non-believer, an infidel, a heathen. I call it how I see it. I say it's ignorance and you just call it faith and unsubstantiated claims. That's something to be ashamed. I'm an atheist. I'm an atheist. I'm an atheist. I'm an atheist. Now let me take a sec, don't mean to sound so hateful, but I swear to God, pun intended, I find it disgraceful that thousands of children are raped by priests, and since they're holy men of God, they get away scot-free. And the Pope does his very best to keep it on the hush. Don't wanna affect business, he loves money too much. We know that they love the kids, but how the fuck can we protect them while they planning to molest them? We teaching them to respect them.
Fuck that.
The system is broke down, working backwards, and the only action or tactic I plan to practice now is to attack them. The parties of God's hands are bloodstained, millions of murders by believers, and they're all in God's name. let me take a sec. Don't mean to sound so hateful, but I swear to God, pun intended, I find it disgraceful that many atheists are told to be quiet. You're not alone, speak your mind, time to let it be known. I'm proud to be an atheist, a skeptic, a non-believer, an infidel, a heathen. I call it how I see it. I say it's ignorance and you just call it faith and unsubstantiated claims. That's something to be ashamed